Everyone, and welcome to week 8 of Opportunities for Learning. We have this week and next week, that's it. So the last couple of weeks we've been talking about a system of equations, and we did it through graphing, and then we did it through substitution, and now we're going to learn through elimination. And this is one that actually you're going to use most often. Once you get used to the concept, you'll probably end up using this one most often. Remember, once you've found the answer, you can then go back into Desmos and put the two equations in, and it will graph it and show you the point to make sure that you know you are correct. So let's take a look at a few examples. All right, so we've got our two equations here. And so what our goal is to eliminate one of the variables. And we need to do that by having its opposite, using what was called the zero effect back when you did integers. We learned about the zero effect back when we did equations. You learned about the zero effect to cancel things out. So in order for that to happen, we're going to either have to multiply this equation, or maybe multiply both. And so 6 and 4, to get them the same or their opposite, we'd have to multiply both. But here, look, 2, I can multiply the 2 and get 12. And since they're both negatives, what I'm going to do is multiply by a negative 6. So I'm going to multiply by a negative 6. So what I'm going to do is over here, I'm going to rewrite the equation. So 6x minus 12y equals 30. I didn't touch that one. Here I'm going to multiply this one by a negative 6. So that gives me negative 24x, a positive 12y, equals, and remember here, a negative onto a negative is a positive, so that's a positive 60. And so that was step 1. Step 2 is I'm going to add these. So I'm going to add each of them. So 6x plus a negative 24x is a negative 18x. These cancel out because a negative and a positive, and so that equals 90. And now we go back to solving equations, so I'm going to divide by the number in front of the variable. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. And so x equals negative 5. So now we know the value of x. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take one of those and put it back into one of these. And it doesn't matter. It should, if you put it back into both, it should give you the same answer if you've done this right. So I'm going to take the second one. So 4 times a negative 5, remember when you substitute, you place it in brackets, minus 2y equals negative 10. So negative 20 minus 2y equals negative 10. So negative 2y equals negative 10 plus 20. Reminder, when it switches sides, it switches its sign. So negative 2y equals 10. Divide by the number in front of the variable. And so y equals negative 5. So our solution then would be negative 5 and negative 5. And that's the point, if we graphed it, that's the point that it would meet up at. Okay? All right, let's take a look at another example. So once again, I've got my two equations. My goal is to eliminate one of the variables so that I can solve for the other one. And how I do that is usually need to multiply or divide one of the equations so it matches up. So in this case, I can do this two ways. I can multiply this equation by negative 6 so that these are opposites, or I can multiply this equation by positive 2 so that these are opposites. So I'm going to multiply here by 2. And so I'm going to rewrite it again, x plus 10y equals 20. And now I've multiplied this by 2, so I get 12x minus 10y equals negative 20. And so I go to add now. Remember, I'm going to add the 2. And so this gives me 13x. They cancel out, equals 0. And so divide by 13. And so x equals 0. All right, so when I go to plug that back into here, remember when you substitute, you place in the brackets. So 10y equals 20, divide by the number in front of the variable, and so y equals 2. So my solution then would be 0 and 2. Okay, let's take a look at the third example. So once again, the goal is to eliminate one of the variables. So here, if I tried to eliminate the x, I would have to multiply both equations, this one by 2 and this one by -9, or this one by 9 and this one by -2. But here, these two numbers, I can get those to meet by simply multiplying this by 2. So I'm going to multiply this equation by 2. So that's going to give me 4x plus 18y equals 38. My other equation I left alone. Didn't make any changes to that one. And so there's my two equations. I'm going to add them. So this gives me 13x. They cancel out. And this should give me 65. We're going to divide by the number in front of the variable. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. And so x is going to equal 5. Once I know the value of x, I can go and plug it into either one of these. I'm going to plug it into here because it's going to give me a small number. Remember, when you substitute into brackets. And so 10 plus 9y equals 19. So 9y equals 19 minus 10. Remember, when it switches sides, it switches its sign. So 9y equals 9, divide by the number in front of the variable, and so y equals 1. So our solution then is 5 and 1. That's the point where these two equations would meet. All right, our last example, just making sure that we have that concept. So once again, trying to eliminate. So if we look at this one, we can do it in two ways. Now, since we've eliminated y each time, let's eliminate x this time. So to eliminate x, I'm going to multiply this equation by -2. Multiply by -2, and that would make that a -8. So -8x minus, right, negative times a positive, -18y equals a negative times a negative is a positive 38. And we kept this one the same. And so we're going to add. So here I'm showing it doesn't matter which one we eliminate first. So here we get a -15y equals 45. We're going to divide by -15. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. And so y equals a -3. Once we have that, we can come over here. I'm going to do the smaller number one. So 8x plus 3 times a -3. Remember, when you substitute, you place it in brackets. All right, so I have my 8x minus 9 equals 7. So 8x equals 7 plus 9. Remember, when it switches sides, it switches its sign. So 8x equals 16. Divide by the number in front of the variable. And so x equals 2. So our solution then would be 2 and -3. So that's how we solve system of equations using elimination. And I think you'll find that this one is pretty easy. You know that some people teach it that they don't do the opposite and then they subtract here instead of adding. I find sometimes students lose in the integers. And so that's why I do the opposite, so that they just cancel each other out. So I hope this little video has helped. Good luck with your worksheet and practice. And once again, if you have any questions, please send a note to your teacher in Teams.